So this story is called Treasure. After their fire games, Igneous and Furnace were too scared to go back to Kilve. Now they were in a real pickle. They had found a baby dragon newly hatched, and they had no idea how to look after it. It was a dark, chilly night, and there was no one else around to help. Ember would know just what to do, Furnace sighed. Ember's in Kilve, Igneous replied. I wish the Dragon Master was here. Furnace shook his head. He'd only tell us to think for ourselves. I don't like thinking. It usually means we have to do something we don't like. Igneous stared hard at the little baby panting in the grass. Does she look a bit odd to you? He asked. It's just the dark, said Furnace. She'll be all right by daylight. So they fetched the hatchling some crickets and curled around her to keep her warm. But in the morning they saw the baby had no wings. Ugh! Tread on her quick, screamed Furnace. Igneous felt sick and cold. He wanted to squash her too. They could say they'd rolled her on her by accident while they were asleep. But the Dragon Master would know it was a lie. No, he said firmly, all dragons are precious. And this one needs help, quickly. Maybe her wings will grow soon. The Dragon Master will do something. We must take her to Kilve. Furnace shuddered. He wasn't ready to go back, and he didn't want to touch the thing that lay on the grass. You can go, I'm staying here. Well, just help me get me started, will you? Asked Igneous, picking up an empty bird's nest out of a tree. He put it down next to the helpless newborn. In you hop, he said kindly. But she was too weak. And very carefully he hooked her in with a claw. I'll be dead before you get home. It's not worth the effort, said Furnace sulkily. She will be fine if you help. Now, put the nest up between my wings so I can carry her home. Then you can go back to the forest if you like. Wrinkling his nose, Furnace used his claw tips to settle the twiggy cradle onto his friend's back. Igneous started to walk, but the nest kept slipping on the dragon's shiny scales. Come with me a bit of the way, just to the edge of Kilve. If she falls from my back, it'll kill her. Furnace muttered something horrid, but did as he was asked. Slowly they swayed their way down the cliff paths and across the bay. Furnace and Igneous felt very scared. We can't do this, Furnace insisted. What if they throw rocks at us? The Dragon Master will have told them what we did to the Midnight Forest. Igneous was worried too. He looked across to the caves where he could see the older dragons bustling about. Perhaps we should wait until dark, then we could sneak in and leave her at Ember's cave. Furnace peered into the nest on Igneous's back. She's very weak. She might not last that long. We've got to keep going. Then Furnace blushed purple. Only a few hours before he'd wanted to tread on the baby. Besides, he blustered, you can't sneak anywhere. Your version of being quiet would waken the Nidhogg. But they kept going. And as it happened, Furnace and Igneous needn't have worried about the other dragons being cross. Kilve was alive with noise and bustle, and their arrival was ignored. The day before, Horace had been playing football with fireworks and fizzle when their ball had started to split. They'd been using another dragon egg, and after a long search, they had found 2 more. Pumice immediately took them all into her cave for safekeeping. Because I never play football with my visitors, she said crustily. Later that morning, 2 of the 3 eggs had hatched. There was a long, thin girl they called Clarice, and a short, fat boy they called Morris. Their arrival caused such a stir, no one had time to be cross when Igneous and Furnace turned up. They went to Ember's cave first, but she brushed them aside. I'm very busy, dears. I'll look at what you found another time. I'm sure it's very nice, but please keep out of my way today. As they stood outside Ember's cave, wondering what to do, Flamethrower came thudding past. He lowered his head and tutted. What are you 2 doing standing around? There's work to be done. Make yourselves useful. Igneous tried to say, Please, We need your help." But the dragon's green-blue tail had already disappeared into the next cave. Everyone was in a hurry. It was hopeless. How could they get help for this sickly baby dragon? Miserable and dejected, Igneous and Furnace sat on a rock next to the sea, hugging the nest and its tiny occupant, wondering what to do. "I'm hungry," announced Furnace, launching himself into the skies. He soon returned with 2 fat cod, one for himself and one for Igneous, and a sprat or 2 for the baby. The big dragons began to enjoy their lunch, but the wingless hatchling just gave a tiny shake and stared at her lunch. Furnace, with his mouth full of fish, said, "Come on, little one, it's good for you." But she still didn't eat. "Don't talk with your mouth full," grumbled Igneous. "It's a bad example for the baby." Then, very gently, he opened the baby's mouth and pushed her food inside. She swallowed and blinked at him with her garnet eyes. "She's taken it. Give her another one, quick," squealed Furnace delightedly. Just then a gravelly voice behind them demanded, "And just what are you 2 ruffians up to?" It was Pumice, and that meant trouble. The 2 dragons crawled aside and let the dragoness peer into the nest. "And where did you find her?" Pumice growled, glaring at Igneous and Furnace. Please, Pumice, we found her up on the hillside late last night. She's poorly and she needs help, but everyone's so busy with the other hatchlings, no one wants to know about her." "She's broken, you see, she's," stammered Furnace, staring guiltily at where Pumice's wings had once been. "I can see exactly what's wrong with her," roared Pumice. "Don't just stand there gawping. Fetch me whelks and winkles, mussels, anything tiny. And you, the daft-looking one," she shook a claw at Igneous, "warm me a puddle of water if you haven't forgotten how to breathe fire." Igneous winced, but Pumice ignored him. "Fetch the Dragon Master. He's with fireworks. Move," she roared, and then with a flick of her scaly old tail, she swept the nest and the baby into her cave. Igneous and Furnace ran to do as they were told. By evening, the little dragon was looking much greener and fatter as she snuggled next to Pumice in the great dragon circle. First, the Dragon Master called Morris and Clarice forward, and their names were proudly announced with cheers and much rattling of scales. Everyone was very excited, but when the wingless one wriggled forward, there was an embarrassed silence. The other dragons looked away or tried to persuade Horace that it was bedtime. The Dragon Master scooped the wingless baby into his arms. "And who is going to name this dragoness?" No one spoke. "Igneous, Furnace, speak up. You found her," ordered Pumice. Igneous crawled over and nudged the little one with his nose. Her big eyes glinted back at him with love. "I name her Treasure. She is the best treasure a dragon ever had," he proclaimed loudly. This time there were cheers, but not many. Then from the back, Fawkes yelled, "But we're not going to keep her, are we? I mean, the great Pumice accepted. What use is a wingless dragon?" This time there were a few murmurs of agreement, but most of the crowd stayed silent. The Dragon Master raised an eyebrow at Igneous and Furnace. "Well?" Furnace took his place on the other side of Treasure. Eyes blazing, he glared around the circle. "Of course we're keeping her. Every dragon is precious, even broken ones." "But what use is she?" demanded Fawkes. "We'll have to spend all our time looking after her. She'll slow us down. I mean, she'll always be a problem, won't she?" Igneous could feel his fire rising in fury, but he spoke firmly. "If it wasn't for her, we would still be out in the midnight forest, too afraid to come back. She gave us the courage to return and say we're sorry to everyone." Furnace's green and blue scales were bristling with anger. "And I never realized before that it's nice to do something for somebody else. I say she stays. She's our dragon. The west wind blew her to us, and here she stays because we love her." He picked Treasure up and held her tenderly in his claws. She blinked her red eyes, wriggled, and burped lovingly up at him. Furnace smiled, drew a deep breath, and added quietly, And I'm sorry too, for burning down the midnight forest." The Dragon Master gave the two dragons a proud and pleased hug as everyone, except Fawkes and one or two others, cheered, roared, and rattled their wings until the rocks began to fall.